Everyone, this video is designed to help establish the way in which you'll be doing your single subject research design study. So I'm starting off with a blank Excel document, and I'll end with the graphing portion of this particular style of study. I will go fairly fast, but that's with the understanding that this is a video and you'll be able to rewind and play back parts that you may have missed. So this way you'll be able to look back on the formulas that I've typed in and be able to reference them at your leisure. So first I'll start with a dependent variable that I'm going to be studying. So let's assume that the dependent variable that I want to study is sleep. So I'll type that in, sleep. And over the course of the first, let's assume that we're doing a 3-week study, and I'm only collecting data during the weekdays. I'm not collecting data during the weekends. So what we'll have is we'll have 5 days of baseline data, 5 days of intervention data, and 5 days of follow-up data. So during the first week, Monday, let's assume that I got 6 hours of sleep. On Tuesday, I got another 6 hours of sleep. Wednesday, I got 7 hours of sleep. Thursday, I got 5 hours of sleep. And Friday, let's say I got 4 hours of sleep. So this is our baseline week data. What we're going to do now is we're going to skip a cell, and then move here to A8. And this will make sense when we start to graph, but we're going to skip the cell here for now. Just believe me that it'll make sense once we get to the graphing part. So now let's assume that during the intervention phase, the independent variable introduced was that I would not have any screen time, meaning that I will not be using my phone or my computer within an hour prior to my quote-unquote bedtime. And let's assume that the intervention week, the second week here, shows data of that particular time period. So that following Monday, let's say that I got 8 hours of sleep. And then on Tuesday, I got 7 hours of sleep. Wednesday, 8 hours of sleep. Thursday, 6 hours of sleep. And then Friday, 9 hours of sleep. Good night's sleep right there. Let's assume that ends the intervention phase. Right? So if you remember from your single subject research design lectures, the baseline phase this week right here, you collect data, but you do not influence data. During the intervention week, you both collect and influence data, and you influence that data through that independent variable. In this example, the independent variable is that I'm being forced to not be on my phone, not be on my computer, not watch TV 1 hour prior to bedtime. That here is the independent variable, that is the intervention. Let's move on. Again, we're going to skip this cell, and it will make sense to you in a bit. We're going to skip this cell, and we're going to go on to follow-up data. During the follow-up phase, as you remember from the lecture, we collect data and we no longer influence data. Very similar to the baseline phase, the follow-up phase is a phase in which we only collect data, we do not influence data, meaning that in regards to sleep, I will just continue to collect data on how many hours of sleep I'm getting, and I'm not necessarily concerned with influencing the number of hours of sleep that I'm getting. So let's say that during the follow-up phase, I get on Monday I get 7 hours of sleep. On Tuesday I get 5 hours of sleep. On Wednesday I get 6 hours of sleep. Thursday I got another 5 hours of sleep. And then on Friday I got 6 hours of sleep. Let's assume that that is the data there. So this is the data from hours of sleep over the course of 3 weeks. Right? Over the course of 3 weeks. Again, this is the baseline phase where we collect data. We do not influence data. This is the intervention phase where we both collect and influence data through the implementation of the independent variable. And this is the follow-up week where we collect data, we no longer influence data, meaning that we extract the independent variable. Now, what we want to do is, before we even get to graphing, we want to establish and analyze the measures of central tendency and the measures of dispersion pertaining to each individual phase. So I'll skip a row right here, a column right here, and then I'll type in baseline, which is A. For measures of central tendency, I have mean, median, and mode. These are my measures of central tendency. Mean, median, and mode are my measures of central tendency. For my measures of dispersion, I have range, variance, and standard deviation. So for my baseline phase, these, mean, median, and mode, are my measures of central tendency. For my baseline phase, range, variance, and standard deviation are my measures of dispersion. So baseline, I'm going to bold this just to have that there, and then I will expand this so this way it has enough space. And then I will skip a cell. I will write in intervention. And I'll make this bold so this way I know. Again, to repeat, my measures of central tendency are mean, median, and mode. Measures of central tendency are mean, median, and mode. My measures of dispersion are range, variance, and standard deviation. My measures of dispersion are range, variance, and standard deviation. And finally, my follow-up phase, follow up. And for that phase as well, I'm going to calculate my measures of central tendency, which are mean, median, and mode. And I'm also going to calculate my measures of dispersion, which are range, variance, and standard deviation. All right. So now some of the formulas here to calculate mean, median, these are all going to be formula based. So we're not going to be manually calculating any of this. We have the luxury of using Excel, so we might as well put it to use. So in order to calculate mean, the command is equals AVERAGE, open parentheses with your mouse. You select the entire data set, and then you close parentheses. Hit enter. Once again, I will be going fairly quickly because if you've missed anything, you can always hit rewind and see what I've done. So just in the interest of repeating just once, I'll do it once more. Mean, the command is the equal sign AVERAGE, open parentheses, and I'll select the data set. For here, the data set is just the baseline, just that first week, and I'm done selecting the data set. I'll close parentheses, enter. So the average hours of sleep per night during the baseline phase, which is the first week, was 5.6 hours per night. To calculate the median, the command is equals MEDIAN, open parentheses, select the data set, close the parentheses, hit enter. So we see that the median here for the baseline phase is 6 hours. The mode equals MODE, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, enter. So we have the mean at 5.6 hours per night average, the median is 6 hours, and the mode is 6 hours as well. So these are our measures of central tendency. Now we go into measures of dispersion. Range tends to be the most difficult one to calculate, so I'll type this out slowly. The formula is equals MAX, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, minus MIN, open parentheses, select the data set, close the parentheses. Now you'll notice before I've hit enter that I've just manually calculated the range. The range is the largest number minus the smallest number. So here we've asked Microsoft Excel to tell us what the maximum number is within this particular data set, and then subtract the smallest number from that larger number by having minimum listed there, and then also selecting the data set. We hit enter and we get that the range is 3, which makes sense because the largest number is 7 and the smallest number is 4, and 7 minus 4 is 3. Variance. We would calculate variance by this particular command, equals VAR. Now we have several options here. We have var.p, var.s, and the question always comes up as to which should we use. var.p, variance for population, means that you are using an entire population as your study, for your study. var.s, the S stands for sample, which means that you're using a sample of the population for your study. As a rule of thumb, actually, the P and the S make a lot of sense in regards to what kind of study or what discipline you're doing your study in. If you're doing your study in the physical sciences, the word physical starts with P. So when you're doing a study in the physical sciences, you'll use var.p for population and for physical sciences. But we're not in the physical sciences, we're in the social sciences, which means that we'll be using var.s, which stands for sample, and social sciences starts with the letter S. So var.s, variance for sample. So you use that command, open parentheses, and then we'll select the data set, close parentheses, enter. So the variance here is 1.3. And standard deviation is easy to calculate because standard deviation is just the square root of variance, but we can also type in the formula, which may for some be easier than that. So the formula would be equals STDEV dot, dot S, not P, because we're on the social sciences. STDEV dot S, open parentheses, select the data set, close the parentheses, enter. Right? So our variance is 1.3. Our standard deviation is 1.140. All right, and that's just for the baseline phase. Now we're going to do this for the intervention phase as well. You'll be asked to do this, so we'll do it here in this demonstration. So the mean, what we'll do is we'll type in the same command, equals AVERAGE, open parentheses. Now we're going to select this data set because now we're working with the intervention week. Close parentheses, enter. We see that the average hours of sleep per night is 7.6. The median equals MEDIAN, open parentheses. Select the data set, close the parentheses, and we find that the median is 8 hours. What is the mode? Equals MODE, open parentheses. Select the data set, close parentheses, and we see that the mode is also 8. Again, these are measures of central tendency, and let's move on to measures of dispersion, with range being the first. If you remember just from a few seconds ago, the command is equals MAX, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, minus MIN, open parentheses, select the data set again, same data set, close parentheses. I'll give you a second to look at the formula, and then you hit enter, and the range is 3. Variance equals var dot s for the social sciences sample, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, enter. That's our variance. Let's check out what the standard deviation is. Equals STDEV dot s, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, enter. And our standard deviation here is 1.1401. 754. Oh, it's the same standard deviation for the intervention phase as there was in the baseline phase. Same thing with the variance, of course. Once more, standard deviation is just the square root of variance. So you can calculate it that way as well. Now let's go on to the follow-up phase and see what the data shows us there. Equals AVERAGE, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, 5.8 hours per night is our average. Median equals MEDIAN, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, enter. Median is 6 hours. Mode equals MODE, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, enter. Mode is 5. That takes care of our measures of central tendency. Moving on to measures of dispersion. Equals MAX, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, minus MIN, open parentheses, select the data set, close the parentheses, give you a second to look at the formula. We'll hit enter, and that's our range for the follow-up phase. Now let's check out variance. Equals VAR dot S, social science, sample, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, enter. We have variance of 0.7. And the standard deviation, which again is the square root of variance, equals STDEV.S, social science, sample, open parentheses, select the data set, close parentheses, and we hit enter. Now we have all the tables that we need. We can sort of do the eye test and see that the average hours of sleep per night went up between the baseline phase and the intervention phase by 2 hours per night. Standard deviation remained the same between the baseline and the intervention phase. And then when we move into the follow-up phase, we go back to close to what the average was prior to the intervention. We went from 5.6 here, the baseline mean, to 5.8, which is the follow-up mean. Standard deviation also decreased. So since this takes care of the tables, let's move on to the graphs. Again, remember that in the baseline phase, you are collecting data, you're not influencing data. During the intervention phase, you are both collecting and influencing data. In this example, the influence is the independent variable of no screen time an hour prior to bedtime. And then during the follow-up phase, you are collecting data and you are no longer influencing data. That's exactly why it's called an ABA design. Wherever you see the letter A, it denotes the absence of an intervention. So you see the baseline is marked with an A, but so too is the follow-up. It's not ABC, it's ABA. You see, during the follow-up phase, we're not implementing an independent variable. We're not implementing an intervention. If we're implementing an intervention, it would be marked with B or another letter, just not A. So when it comes to graphing, we'll do it this way. So you have it here. You'll select this row. So you'll follow my mouse. You'll select, in this data set, you'll select from A1 to A18. You may have more data. If you've collected 7 days worth of data, obviously you'll have more data. But in this instance, we have just these few fields of data. So we've selected from A1 to A18. You'll select the data that you have in this particular column. You'll click on Insert. And then you'll go to Line Graphs right here. Again, let me just do this again. Again, you can rewind, replay if you miss anything, but I'm selecting this data right here. And then I'm clicking Insert right here, going to my line graph. And I'm going to select the first 2D line graph. The first 2D line graph. And that's what shows up. I'm going to make this larger so this way it's more visible. Alright, that looks pretty good. We're not done yet. In order for this to be full single subject research design style, there's a style that's associated with this kind of design. We're going to have to first eliminate these horizontal lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these sort of dull gray horizontal lines. I'm going to click on just one, and all of them are highlighted. And I'm going to hit delete. So this way those are deleted. All right. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover on any of the data points here All right, so any of the blue line that you see here, I'm going to hover on the blue line, and then I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to go to add data labels. I'm going to add data labels. Once again, I'm going to hover on the blue line. I'm going to right click. This dialog box comes up. I'm going to hit add data labels. Now I have the data label showing the exact number associated with each day of data that I've collected. And I'm curious to see if over the course of the 3 weeks, if overall hours of sleep is on the decline or the incline, even with the intervention phase baked in there. So I want to add what's known as a trend line. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hover on the blue line. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add trend line. Now the linear option is perfectly fine. There's no need to do anything more than that. So we'll close this out. And we see that the trend line is present right there. It sort of suggests that although the intervention seemed to work, it didn't stick. There's a key difference between an intervention that works and an intervention that sticks, meaning that during this intervention week when I reduce my screen time to the point where I'm not on my phone or on my computer watching TV an hour before bedtime, I am getting more sleep. 8 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours. I am getting more sleep. But without the existence of the intervention, I'm back to what's called homeostasis, averaging about 5.6, 5.8 hours per night. Right? So this is the baseline phase, this is the follow-up phase, and this in the middle is the intervention phase. Now you see the gaps here. These lines are not connected. The reason why they're not connected is because of the gap that's right here in field A7 and A13. If those gaps were not there, the lines would all be connected. This, however, is not the end of your single subject research design graph. You still have a couple of things that you need to add to it. First, you need to separate each phase using vertical lines. In order to do that, we go to Insert. We go to Shapes, which is, let me find it here. Where is Shapes? Oh, there we go. There's Shapes, Illustrations, Shapes. And I'm going to click on this line right here. And from there, I know that I'm going to have to draw this line up. So I can sort of try and find an area where it's not a vertical line isn't going to interfere with existing data, which seems to be right around here. And I'm going to stretch this line all the way up. That looks good to me. It doesn't have to be perfect, obviously, right? But that looks good to me because it separates the baseline phase from the intervention phase. But the problem now is that the intervention phase and the follow-up phase are still, there's no vertical line separating the two. So what I'm going to do is the same thing as I just did. So I'll go to Insert, go to Illustrations, I'll go to Shapes, go to Line. And I'll find an area that vertical line will not interfere with the existing data. I'll stretch it from there. Alright, I'll let go, and there we go. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is more science than art, but we just want to make sure that we're doing everything the right way. So we have here the baseline phase, here the intervention phase, and here the follow-up phase. We still are not done though. We're still not done. We have to label. We have to label these phases. Once we do that, then we are done with our single subject research design graph. So we'll go back to Insert, and we'll click on Text, and we'll click on Text Box. And with that, I'm going to select right there. I'm going to type the letter A. Okay. That's A. And now this, the intervention phase, is B. So I'm going to go to Insert, Text, Text Box. I'm going to put it right in the middle there. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm actually intentionally making it not perfect to show that it's not the art that you're being graded on, it's the scientific communication of this data. So you see that the A here is not on the same level as the B. That really doesn't matter. This is the baseline phase, this is the intervention phase. As long as that's known, you're being graded on the science and not the art. And then we'll do one more. Insert, text, text box. And we're going to find an area right here. That looks good to me. Now, the letter here is clearly, as I've mentioned before, not C. It's A again, because this is a single subject research design. The style is called an ABA design. Any phase that is absent of an intervention will have the letter A associated with it. Any phase that has any other letter besides besides A, including B, C, D, so on and so forth, will have some type of intervention associated with it. So this is an ABA design. You have the vertical lines, you've got the trend line, you've got the data labels, you've deleted the horizontal lines in the background, and this is it. This is all you need to produce in regards to your graph when it comes to your single subject research design. Remember that when you're submitting your work, you'll be submitting both the Microsoft Word document because of the narrative that brings everything together, but you'll also be submitting the Microsoft Excel document, and this is exactly how your Excel document should look. You'll have the dependent variable right here, acknowledging that the independent variable will be applied during the intervention phase. You'll have the tables right here, the baseline tables with measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion, intervention, measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion, follow-up phase, measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion, and then you have your graph right here with all of the elements that we've covered just now. So I'll end it there. Again, I'm recording this for a reason because I know that I am going fast for some, so you'll be able to rewind and look over what you've missed, including the formulas and how to develop the graph. But this is ultimately what myself and your other professors are looking for when it comes to this particular assignment. Thank you for your time.